All right, Fresh. Let's go to our last Power 5 conference, the SEC. Oh, boy, howdy. There's a lot to talk about in this conference here. There's a lot of interesting things. There are some really big-time marquee football games this season. Fresh, I'll lead off. I'll let you lead off here. Who do you got? What are the three biggest games going into the season for the SEC?
I mean, like you said, there's tons of games to look at. You could pick multiple games each weekend. I think that's between the SEC and the Big Ten and then Pac-12. There are tons of games. But when it came down to what I was looking at, September 16th, South Carolina at Georgia. Now, last year, Georgia went to Columbia and beat the trash out of them. So after that point, South Carolina, Rattler kind of got comfortable. They sort of built some momentum. They had a clunker up Florida, and they just destroyed Tennessee, and then had a very strong early bowl game. They lost late to Notre Dame, but they showed signs of life. They beat Clemson in there too. The program kind of rallied. They had some guys transfer out, but Shane Beamer's built a core there. And this is a chance for South Carolina to have some sort of redemption. It's also an early season test, the first test for Georgia. Their first two games aren't going to be worth salt. So how does this Bulldog team really look between the hedges opening week? Technically, I'm going to call it opening week. The first two games don't matter. And how is South Carolina, how's that team really matured since last year's matchup? And how do they progress? Is the game more competitive? Do they come in there? They've done it before. In 2019, they pulled off the upset with Muschamp as the head coach. Can they cause some chaos early on in the season and really shake things up? Really, that'll be the first time that Carson Beck really has a true game against a legit opponent. How does he show up versus the Dogs and for the Dogs and throw the ball around? A big game to keep an eye on. We're going to see a pulse check there for both programs early in the season. The second one is up in Knoxville, Texas A&M at Tennessee, October 14th. First of all, I think A&M's going to be a lot better than we were last year. I think they kind of got hit in the face with some serious reality last year after all the hype. They got back down to earth. They've kind of maybe refocused, play a little better, play a little more inspired football. They've definitely recruited at a high level. And it's Tennessee looking ahead to Alabama the game after. That's where I think it's going to be a trap game for the Vols. Up at home, you're looking ahead to Alabama. You won last year. You have to go to Tuscaloosa next week. Who is truly focused on A&M when the Aggies come into town? The Aggies could pull off an upset and really shake up the SEC East and the SEC as a whole. So that's a game right there. Where is Tennessee's mind at when the game happens? And then the third one, the Iron Bowl. Hugh Freeze has actually beaten Nick Saban twice when he was at Ole Miss. They host him. They've obviously hit the recruiting trail going for the Class 24 hard. They've gotten players that are playing better. Can they pull off an upset? In 2021, the Brian Harsin team should have beaten Alabama. They didn't have the fine way to get through late in the football game. Can Hugh Freeze find tricks up his sleeve? When Auburn's competitive and the Iron Bowl in general, I don't care how good or bad you are, Jordan Hare was going to be a loud stadium. It's going to be hostile. Can Hugh Freeze pull off an upset and really shake up the playoff? Just imagine Alabama being, I'll say, a 10-1 coming into that football game, and then Auburn upsetting them, it just destroys everything, ruins it. This could be a big game chaos right there at the end of the year. So those are three games I have on my radar going forward.
Fresh, there's so many fascinating matchups here that we got to really – I can't wait for us to get into the season because there's so many games that I wanted to talk about that I just kind of had to cross them off and go, we'll talk about these guys later. But I think one of the biggest games of the year, every single year, is LSU traveling to Bama. Anytime that the Tigers and the Tide play each other, it becomes deeply personal. You know, Brian Kelly got the win last year. He jumped over the shark that is Nick Saban. He kind of gotten to that point where finally he beat Saban there. I feel like I just get this feeling that Alabama is really motivated this season to eventually avenge some of the losses that they had. LSU, Tennessee, I think you're kind of put on notice this year. The other game, though, that I'm really kind of fascinated with is Texas A&M traveling to Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss is kind of a sleeper team. There's some questions over there at quarterback. I know there's all sorts of stuff, and they brought in what felt like 15 new quarterbacks through the transfer portal for competition. I kind of am more. I've looked into Ole Miss going into the season. I'm liking more and more what Lane Kiffin is doing over there, but they also have maybe my second favorite running back in the entire country in Judkins. He is an absolute monster. He is one of my players to watch. The other one, though, that I really am curious on, and this game is going to really be the measuring stick. And while I think Georgia's still going to win this game, we are going to see how good of a coach Josh Heupel is. We're going to see how far Tennessee has come. That's November 18th when Georgia winds up traveling to Knoxville to face the Volunteers in Neyland. It's going to tell us so much about both of those programs. Is Georgia, because the majority of Georgia's schedule, while yes, I'm starting to come around on the Ole Miss thing. South Carolina can play Georgia tough. I got a lot more questions about South Carolina than I got about Georgia. But that Tennessee game, I think that Tennessee will have a lot of things figured out by the time they get to November 18th. I think Georgia will have a lot of things figured out. So that's going to be a marquee matchup game because I think we talked about this in our preview there, Fresh. That game could, Tennessee could wind up losing to Alabama this year. That game could still be for the Volunteers to get to Atlanta for the championship game. And that's a lot to play for. I still think Georgia's going to roll in that game, but I'm using that game as a measuring stick to see where is Tennessee because, most people know if you ever ask me about Josh Heupel, I think the world of Heupel. I think they got a lot of great things going there. They've got a lot of talent there, but are they still a year away? And that's a big game for me.
Like I said, there's loads of games going left and right. When it comes to players, the player that I'm really looking at in the SEC, Arkansas quarterback KJ Jefferson. He's been a dude the past 2 years, kind of got beat up, dealt with some injuries last year, and kind of helped. They had lost some steam. If he can stay healthy, the dude could put up 50 touchdowns, whether throwing or running for the Hogs. It's just that the defense can help him out if they can get stops, but he can put it up on himself. He puts it on his shoulders. He loves playing at Arkansas. Play for Sam Pittman. He could be a dark horse contender for the player of the year in the league. I'm not saying he's going to win the Heisman Trophy because you're going to have to be undefeated or usually play for a championship at that point. But he could be the player of the year. I think he's the player you got to keep watching because he's going to make a difference in the SEC West, maybe pulling off an upset over somebody else, maybe being that guy who gets the job done, maybe takes out LSU, maybe takes out Alabama. Um, it, Putting it on his shoulders, having athletic ability, KJ Jefferson is a stud, and I think he's going to leave it all on the field as last year. When it comes to my surprise team, Auburn is going to be a surprise team. There's talent in that locker room. There was talent there last year. Brian Hurston had no idea what he was doing. I don't even know how he even got the job in the first place at Auburn. But what Hugh Freeze is going to do, he understands the league. He's going to get guys in there. The transfer portal helps. They've brought new energy into that program. And Auburn is going to be a force. They're going to play better. They might not win 10 games, but they're going to be a lot more competitive in every single football game. And they're going to make games very, very difficult for their opponents. And they're going to make teams actually play a full 4 quarters. It's not going to be the team you saw the past 2 years where you could go in there with your B team and beat the trash out of them. You've got to play, and you've got to play early and often versus Auburn. You can't give them an inch. That team's going to be better, and I think they're just building something to get back to Auburn standards in the next 2 to 3 years of the recruiting. So keep an eye on the Tigers. When it comes to the title, the Dogs are going to win it back-to-back SEC championships, and they'll get in the playoff and go from there.
All right, Fresh. So, like I said, Judkins is one of the players to watch, but I'm also watching out for Mason Smith at LSU. The D tackle was supposed to be a anchor in that LSU line right there. He messed up his knee in that opening game against Florida State. He could be a huge difference maker for LSU to really bring back the teeth of the Tiger defense for them. I'm fascinated to see what he brings back. Is he the same player coming off that ACL injury? Sometimes kids aren't the same at that point. And getting through an injury as a 20-year-old, I'm hoping that he's got the right people and the right coaching staff around him because he truly is a special talent there. Possible first-round pick there. My surprise team is Ole Miss, though. I think that the more I'm learning about them, the more I'm watching, more I'm reading about them, I think that maybe something could be going on there in the state of Mississippi. And I think Lane Kiffin could really have maybe his best year at Ole Miss. My champion, I went back and forth with this. I think I traded off champions like 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe 10 times. But for some reason or another, I think the easy pick would be to say Georgia's going to roll that right back again. I think the East is way easier than the West. But, and this is really, really, really big but, I just get this feeling that Saban's going to pull it off. I think that because all the chips are down, there's all of these things that, has he lost a step? Is Alabama's dynasty over? I mean, there's all this talk about like the step backwards Alabama's taken, and I think he's just going to roll through people. I don't know why. I just get this feeling that Alabama is just going to be so motivated this year. And again, when you're talking about 18 to 23-year-old kids here, motivation is always one of the biggest factors. There's talent in Tuscaloosa. We all know that. They're a top 5 recruiting class year in, year out. I don't think Nick Saban forgot how to coach football. I think there's a lot of positive things over there. The quarterback thing still does concern me. I need to see it with my own 2 eyes. Georgia's the easy pick, but I'm just not, I can't do it first because I get this feeling that Saban is really ticked off. So I'm going Alabama.
We said it during our top 25 breakdown. We had Alabama in our top 5, and you can listen to that and get our true feelings on them. But that team, it's Saban is Saban for a reason. Alabama's Alabama for a reason. They are going to be a force to be reckoned with.